Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to you. I am Rachel with Rachel Morgan Coaching, and today I have Danielle Nicole with me, who is a life coach and positive psychology practitioner who helps you realign your worth, outline your ideal life, and build rituals to help you thrive. And funny enough, Danielle and I actually have known each other for years. We used to work together for the same jewelry company at the same time. And we both ended up leaving about the same time for different reasons, and reconnected here in the online space. So it's really exciting to have her here. And Danielle, of course, has held many roles within the fine jewelry industry, including sales, buying, and also payroll, which is why I knew her. I called her up quite often. So after leaving the company that we had both worked for, she went back to school, got her degree in psychology, and started to support her new career as a life coach. So her interest in positive psychology has spanned 10 years. In fact, she's graduating this month with a certificate in applied positive psychology. So please, first of all, help me in congratulating her because that is so exciting. So without further ado, please help me welcome Danielle. How positive psychology influences the sales process. And as many of you know, a positive mindset is something I strongly believe in. Hello.
Hi, Rachel. How are you this morning?
I'm so good. So good. How are you?
Good. I'm good, thanks. I woke up early, got my workout in, so I'm ready. I'm ready for my day.
Yes, you're glowing from your
Thank
workout.
you. It's definitely the ring light, but thank you.
But, yeah. Well, for everyone that joining in, oh, thank you. Someone said congratulations to you. I love that.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I appreciate it.
Well, for everyone who's joining in, I would love if you can tell us where you're from. We'd love to know, and share any questions that you have with us in the comments. We'll make sure to address them as much as we can. So for those who also don't know, Danielle and I are both from Seattle. So obviously, because we work together.
Yeah.
Yes. So tell us, I feel like positive psychology is such a big word. What does it mean?
Yeah, definitely. So, positive psychology, I think a lot of people just hear those words and they think that it's just like naive positivity, right? But so, what positive psychology actually is, it's a fairly new field in psychology. It was founded in 1998. So, it is less than 30 years old at this point, right? Yeah. And it was founded by Martin Seligman. He is a researcher. He was a psychological researcher who researched learned helplessness, which I won't go into that too much right now. But he thought one day, what if we could take the principles of psychology and instead of trying to, if you look at mental health on a spectrum, psychology was always trying to take what our illness back to neutral. He said, what if we use those same principles and try to take neutral into wellness? So the idea of positive psychology is using those psychological principles to move north of neutral. So instead of just being able to survive, you can really thrive.
Right. I love that. And I love that there's like this whole science behind it. It's not just this concept, but there's actually studies and research, and that it's been around for a while. So it's not just like this new trendy idea that we need to be positive and but being above neutral. Like, what a beautiful way of saying that.
Yeah, exactly. One of the other founders, so Martin Seligman, and then Chris Peterson was the other one, and Chris Peterson passed away a few years ago, so he's not mentioned as much anymore. But Chris Peterson used to sum up positive psychology in 3 words, and that is other people matter. So I know, I love that. I
Yeah.
think the world can use more of that. So yeah, it's all about, like I said, not feeling your negative emotions, but how do you deal with them, and how can you, bounce back even better? How can you use resilience and positive psychology to continue to grow and not just remain in neutral?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Well, I'm so excited to dive into that because I think it's something that we all need. Yeah. Loved it. And I just want to point out we've got people from all over the Middle East, Philadelphia. Like, that's so cool that you have taken your time to join us today. It's like, I know Danielle and I are both really flattered by that.
Yeah, thanks, guys.
So tell me more about that. What does that look like when you start implementing that? How do you have a more positive mindset? How do you go above neutral?
Yeah, definitely. So, one of the main ways to do it is by utilizing your strengths. So,
Hmm.
I always joke with anytime I'm like in with a client or something, I'm like, I have my handy dandy textbook of my strengths because there's a couple of different modalities that you can use to find your strengths. So, like when we were talking about it, Rachel, the other day, we were talking about the Strengths Finder, which is through Gallup, and I think they have 30 strengths. But the one that is used in positive psychology, because it was developed by Martin Seligman and Chris Peterson, is called the VIA Strength. And there's actually it's called the Character Strengths Institute. And so it's this whole like company that's been built up around strengths. And they have 24 strengths that they use. And so you can start by identifying your strengths. And then once you know what they are, you can use them to work on thriving. So, like my top strength, for example, is bravery. And so, anytime I go into a situation where I'm feeling, I don't know, neutral or lower than neutral, I think, okay, bravery is something that I'm really good at. And I know I've got that. How can I use my bravery to set myself up for success in this situation?
Yeah, I love that bravery is your strength because that really is something a lot of people do not have. And if you don't know what Danielle is talking about, Strength Finder and I think you called it was VIA.
Via, yeah.
It's a test that you take to determine what your strengths are. So we'll ask you a series of questions and you answer them, of course, as honestly as possible, and we'll identify your top strengths. And I know with Strengths Finder, it will tell you your opportunities and how you work in the workplace and how you're appreciated and things to look out for. So it's a very like comprehensive thing actually, and very insightful to learn about.
Yeah, definitely. The strengths are so important. I just love them. I have my top five on a sticky note that I keep right next to my desk. So, or right next to my computer. So anytime I'm working or I'm with a client or something, I can remind myself of my strengths. Another one of my top ones is love. Do you know what your top ones are, Rachel?
I do, but I want to hear
Yeah.
yours. And hi, Michael. So tell me, yeah, so bravery and love, and what are your other ones?
Okay, so of the 24, my top five, let's see if I can remember them off the top of my head because of course I don't have my sticky note in this room, but it's bravery, honesty,
Mm.
love, I want to say fairness, and I actually think appreciation of beauty is up there, which makes sense. I worked in the jewelry industry for 8 years. I love beautiful things, right?
Those are all good qualities to have in someone that you work with too, especially honesty, because it's the space can be so confusing sometimes that we don't always know. And so I actually really value that that is one of your strengths. I love it. I think
Yeah.
for me, so Strengths Finder is a little bit different, right? It was
Hmm.
focus. So it means like I focus no matter how long it takes to get something done. Like it will get done, even if it takes me like 15 hours.
Oh, that's good.
A learner, like the willingness to always want to learn, and an achiever, which probably is not
Yep,
surprising,
that
and
tracks.
patient. Yeah. So, and I want to say, I can't remember. I think if I took it again, I would be a woo, someone who likes to win others over. I think it's part of my personality.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think I've done the Strengths Finder one, or if I did, it was a really long time ago. So I'm gonna need to go back and do that one because I
Yes.
love, like, I think the way that you use them, can be very much the same, but because they're different strengths, it just gives you an opportunity to look into different areas of your life.
Right. So we have a question. So, what book would you recommend to read for sales psychology?
Good question. So I think I'm actually reading a book right now. And it came out last year, I want to say it came out during the pandemic because she mentions the pandemic in the book. And it's called Fierce Self-Compassion by Kristen Neff. And now this is definitely, stay with me here because this is not a book exactly about sales psychology, right? But it goes into literally the title of the book, Fierce Self-Compassion, how you can hold space for yourself and be compassionate to yourself. And I think that can relate to sales psychology because I know when I was in sales, it's all about of course, the client experience and making sure that we take care of our clients, but we have goals to meet, right? Monetary goals, number goals, we need signups, we need dollars. And sometimes when you don't hit those or you're not hitting them the way you want to, it can be demoralizing. And so to remember to hold that space for yourself and to know that it's okay. And, I can come back and bounce back and,
Right.
approach the situation with a perspective of loving yourself, right? Like I said, holding
Yeah.
space for yourself to know that it's okay, that not every single day is going to be the perfect day. There's always tomorrow.
Yeah. Danielle, would you be able to type that in the comment box?
Yeah, definitely.
And then I also wanted to point out that Michael had suggested reading The Joy of Selling by Steve Chandler. So, and then also, okay, cool. Perfect. And I'd have to think about a good psychology book because a lot of what I typically read is just sales in general, like sales theory. I don't know that it's necessarily psychology. So I'd have to think about that a little bit and what I would want to recommend. But I know one of my favorite books right now that I do love is a book called What Customers Crave by Nicholas Webb. And it's really just about understanding client experience and how it impacts. So a little different than positive psychology, but it is a great book for sure. So, okay, you brought up such a fabulous point about how sometimes when we're rejected, right, or we're not reaching like our sales goal, we have a really like our mental state can really impact how we go forward as a business owner or within our business, right? And I think that's kind of where like psychology comes in, positive psychology. So I would love to know like more about that actually.
Yeah, definitely. So I can't talk about how to use positive psychology without first mentioning the negativity bias. So I don't know if any of y'all have heard about that before, but if you think about humans, right, and the vast history of humanity, it served us well to remember negative experiences because if the saber-toothed tiger by the watering hole wasn't top of mind, the next time we went to get water, we're going to be eaten by the saber-toothed tiger, right? So we need to remember that it's there. So we go to another watering hole or we go when the saber-toothed tiger is not there. So we are hardwired to remember negative experiences. And this is where positive psychology really comes in, is that we live, we live a pretty, at this point at least, right? We're not, and I certainly don't want to intimate that life is easy because it is absolutely not, but we're not necessarily worried about getting, mowed down by a predator, like we would have thousands and thousands of years ago, right? So we don't necessarily need to hold on to all of the negative things that happened to us. We don't need to hold on to the deal we didn't close. We don't need to hold on to the customer who didn't reach back out to us after we followed up, right? So this is where the positive psychology comes in, and that we get to choose, because it does have to be an active choice, because again, we're not wired this way, but we get to choose to move past that and focus back on what can I do to move forward.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. That is so interesting to think about. I've never considered that before, like how we hold on to past things that maybe we don't even realize, and even like a negative experience like not closing the sale, right?
Yeah,
So
exactly.
I want to circle back for a second and kind of connect all this, right? And for anyone who's just joining in, please, we would love to know where you're from, and please put any questions that you may have in the comments. But since we had talked about strengths, like why is that so important to positive psychology? And how can we start working to be more positive? Like how can we start implementing? So that's two
Yeah.
questions.
Okay. So the first question is why strengths are important to positive psychology. And I just have to like just read the quote from Martin Seligman because it perfectly sums it up. And so the strengths give us a common language to that are the well springs or mansions of the good life, right? These are the things that by focusing on them, we get to live, we get to have a life well lived. So, yeah. And then what was your second question?
Okay, so first of all, like how does knowing strengths like help you, right? And I think you just explained that. And
Yes.
then like how can you start utilizing that so that you can like well, just like Sim said, like how can I do that to move forward? Like how does this relate to positive psychology?
Yeah, definitely. So, I mean, let's use an example, right? Think about the time. I don't know, do you have a specific example? Can you think of a time where you didn't close a sale that you really wanted to?
Absolutely.
I know we all can, right?
Oh my,
So, because we all can call that to mind, right? Because those are, thanks to our negativity bias, those are the easy ones to remember, not the time we closed the big sale that, we didn't think we were going to, or the easy sale, right? We've all had a couple of those at least. Um, so think back to the time when things didn't go your way, right? Um, and instead of just thinking like, oh, I wasn't prepared enough, or I didn't have the right tools or the right product or the right service, or I didn't jibe with the customer or whatever it was. Instead of thinking about the things that did not go right, think about how you can use your strengths to tweak it so it will go right in the future. So instead of saying, um, I I should have sent that extra follow-up email. I don't know why I didn't do that. Instead of thinking about that, say, instead, okay, I know one of my strengths is, um, I'll just use love again as the example. I know one of my top strengths is love. So, how can I use that in communicating with my customers and my clients? How can I use my strength of love so that I'm communicating with them in a meaningful, loving way? Right. So that's where I think that's where the strengths really come in to help us, move past those negative experiences and reframe what happened from something negative to a future potential positive.
I think what you said there was really good to note that even as like a store manager, like we focus so much on reaching numbers, right? And even as a business owner now, we're like, we have to hit these goals. And we often focus on what we're not doing right and how we can improve them. But not often do we focus on what we're actually doing right and how we can get better at it and lean into that and use that to our advantage. And so I know as a store manager, like I love doing strengths finder with my teams so that I could learn where their strengths were so that I could put them in proper roles within the team so that they thrived and were excited. It creates like a culture, right? But in
Yeah.
your own business, I think it's important to understand where your strengths are so you can lean more into it and that you aren't focused on what you're not doing, right?
Yeah.
And it's kind of a deflating feeling to feel like you're just not doing everything right all the time. But you have to give yourself some credit, right?
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah, and I love what you said too about like being a manager and having a team, right? Like instead of focusing on Sally who's bad at X, Y, or Z, what is she good at? And looking at your team and like you said, like when you're managing a team, if you're able to pull the strengths from everyone, like you are able to literally put together the dream team. And as a business owner, who doesn't have a team, right? As a
Right.
solopreneur, to lean into your strengths is like what an incredible opportunity that you get to build a business around your strengths and you get to serve your clients in the way that you best know how. I think that's just like the coolest thing instead of focusing on like, oh, how can I be better? Not that we shouldn't focus on that, right? Like we should
Right.
always focus on improving, but to
Right.
really put the emphasis on the strengths that are already there and working towards those, I think is just a really awesome opportunity.
Right. And I think you will feel more confident as a result when you know that as well. And like you said, like there's nothing wrong with wanting to improve and knowing the areas that maybe aren't your strengths or your forte, right?
Yeah.
And then asking for help, right?
Yeah,
Can't everything.
definitely.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I actually learned so much from the last note I got from a client. So I would love to know what you learned from your client. How interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
So tell me then, like, how can we use this more in sales now when we're selling or interacting with?
Yeah. Exactly. So, I mean, I think like the number one, I'm like flipping through my textbook. It's my,
No,
seriously, my clients tease me because I'll be like, excuse me, let me look at the textbook.
no,
Because
we
I
love
want
it.
to use I want to use a different strength as an example as opposed to my five that I keep using, right? Um, so one of the although one of the ones that I did actually mention was appreciation of beauty. And I think that one is a really, really interesting one to consider, when you're thinking about helping clients. And how, and it doesn't have to necessarily be like beauty in the sense of like a beautiful person or a beautiful thing. It can be a beautiful experience, right? So I think when we're helping our clients, when we're working with our clients, we want to give them the best possible experience, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because that's what develops the relationship. I mean, ideally, when we have a client, we don't just work with them once. We don't just sell them one thing. We are able to develop a relationship with them over time, because that's what that's what, for me at least, I think is so, so important. I think back to my time in jewelry, and I think, if I'm selling if I'm selling a good, I want them to keep coming back when they get engaged. I sold them their engagement ring when they got married. I want to sell them their wedding bands when they have their first baby. I want to sell them the push present and the mother's ring and um, and you don't do that if you don't give them a good experience, if you don't give them a beautiful experience. So thinking about the different ways that you can use your strengths to give your clients the best possible experience, and also thinking about how your strengths benefit you and how
Mm-hmm.
you would want them to be used on yourself as a customer, right?
Yeah.
That was always a big one for me, is how would I want to feel in this
Yeah.
situation?
Right. That is actually something that I work with my clients. Like, well, how do you want them to feel interacting with you? And how do you know that they feel that way? And like, how would you want to feel? And so we talk a lot about like secret shopping, other businesses, right? And just getting a
Yeah.
feel like to be a client. Like I think we forget about that as a business owner or as the salesperson. For some reason, something changes, right? We have to remind ourselves like we are clients to other businesses as well, and we know what it feels like.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. And that kind of goes back to like the compassion thing that I was talking about earlier. And that's something that working in retail really taught me, is it teaches you how to be a better customer too,
Yeah. It's
right?
100%. Yes.
Yeah, so it gives you that compassion for the person behind the counter who's maybe still trying to figure it out, right? Because not everybody gets to go into a sales situation saying, here are my strengths, here are how I'm going to use them, and I'm so
Right.
enthusiastic to do it, right?
Right. And I also love that you said, gosh, I hear so many similar, like our culture of learning about sales is so similar because of our
Yeah,
experience. I'm like, I know what you're talking about. But,
yeah,
you know, someone that obviously doesn't sell a product like in jewelry, like they don't have all these like celebrations that they're going through with their clients. So what would you tell someone that's in a service-based situation? Like how can you create an experience through positive psychology? Is that too big of a
um, no, I think for me, whether it's a good or a service, it's all about how you make the person feel. So like one of the things that I do, and this is not really positive psychology, but it's loosely positive psychology, but the love languages, right? We've all heard of the love languages. My love language is gift giving. And I love getting things. I love giving things. I just love it. And so that goes back to that experience, is how do I want my client to feel? And so like one of the things I do with all of my clients is when we first sign on, I send them a plant. The name of my business is Calathea Coaching, and the Calathea plant represents new beginnings. And a plant, obviously, very obviously, represents growth. And that's how I want my clients to feel going into our experience together. So I send them a plant as a welcome gift, as an onboarding gift. I know you talk about onboarding. Um, and so, yeah, I just really think, how would I want them to feel? And maybe this is because I'm an only child, but viewing it from that, maybe slightly selfish standpoint of how would I want to feel?
yeah.
And then letting them, guiding them down that path to how would I want to feel? I want to feel appreciated and excited. And I want to know that the person that I'm working with, my coach, is excited to be working with me too, right? So by doing that and really just starting the experience from this place of like warmth and openness, I just think it really it really sets the tone for the rest of your experience with the client.
You are speaking my love language, literally, because mine is
Yeah.
and I'm also an only child. So, but I think it's really important in the onboarding. I know that's a totally different conversation, but
Yeah.
really putting yourself in their place and like, when have you felt really appreciated and excited? And what about it? And how can you like do better? Right? Like, how would you want to feel if you just signed on with a coach? You want to keep the momentum going. What can you do that's unique and different? And I love that you send a plant. Like, what a beautiful thing to like represent growth. I love it. And I feel like, we didn't really talk about this, and I don't know that it's necessarily positive psychology, but how the energy that you put out there, right, is
Oh
really,
yeah.
what's the word I'm looking for, is infectious. And so
Hmm.
when you start off on a really positive, excited note, like they're going to be positive and excited as well. And if you're not putting the effort in, like you can't expect them to do the same, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, the idea of it being infectious is so, so, so true. Right. The human contagion is something that we talk about in positive psychology. So it definitely fits. And how striving to be a person who puts out the energy in the world, because it's very easy to absorb. It's not as easy to be the one that emits, right? So going into an interaction with a client, taking something that I do too, if it's especially with a new client, right? And we don't already have that established rapport before, I hop on Zoom with them, I close my eyes and I take a breath and I think like, how do I want them to feel? I want them to feel welcomed and loved, and I just ground myself in that moment. And then that is, that's what allows me to kind of be the one that puts the energy out, as opposed to being the one that's absorbing whatever they're throwing at me.
Great. Yeah. And first of all, hi, Tyler. I'm so glad that you finally got to come on a live with me. He's always like, I missed your lives. Um, but one thing that I think we can all relate to is that sometimes we just have those like really terrible clients or situations that really just frustrate us, and we absorb that negative energy, like you said. And so sometimes we take that into the next client. And one thing I've really had to learn over the years is that the next person you work with does not know what happened before. And if we carry that over, we now have influenced them, right? Without realizing it. Like,
Yeah.
it's not their problem to know what happened before. And so it's truly like a skill being able to separate yourself, right? And being like, that's their energy. I don't need to absorb that and I don't need to take that forward. But it can be really hard. And I think we've all been in those situations where like a call doesn't work out or someone says something to us in the DM or something just happens, right? So being that you're in, I know this is, I hope you can answer this, okay, but being that you come from this perspective, like what would you recommend to kind of help you with that transition so that you're not carrying that forward?
Yeah, definitely. So I have to say hi. I saw Dondra joined and Lourdes joined, and I want to say hi to them. Thank you for joining. Um, so to not, and this is, gosh, so many things. I'm like, where do I even want to start? Something really like super basic. Um, but if you have a negative experience and you have like 5 minutes between the time the negative experience happened, because sometimes we get off the phone and we have to like hop on the next call, right? But if you can give yourself a minute, like literally go outside and walk around the block. Like that's one of the biggest things that I think is just like so important, that connecting with nature. I actually learned yesterday, I feel like Dondra probably knows about this. I learned about the Schumann frequency yesterday, and it's like the frequency that like the earth vibrates at. I was like, oh, it's really, and I'm really, really interesting. And it was talking about grounding, right? And have you ever heard about grounding? Like literally grounding, taking your shoes and socks off and putting your feet on the ground. And that connects you to the planet, and that connects you to the present. So, and by connecting to the present, you're able to hopefully let go of the past, let go of that negative experience, and move into the next one. Yeah, Tyler's saying try to leave a gap between clients. Absolutely. That's something that I always do too, because first of all, it's just like providing a service, especially as like a coach, like that can be kind of an emotionally taxing job at times. And so to just give yourself time to breathe between sessions is very important. To let go of anything heavy that happened in a previous session, like we're saying, so you don't bring it into the next one. But then if you're booked back to back and you're like, I don't have time to take a breath, you have 15 seconds, right? So try to ground yourself in that moment. Take a deep breath, like I said, like I like to do before a session. And if you can relate that to something tangible, I think that's really important too. Like I'm looking right here on my desk, I have my little rocks, my little crystals. And I'm a little into the woo. But I will, especially if I'm going into like a difficult session, I know that to take a moment to ground myself into my crystal. And sometimes I'll like put it on my notebook as I'm going into the session. And
Yeah.
that's my reminder of how do I want my client to feel? How do I want to feel? I want to feel good, right? And then to tie it all back into strengths, what do I know works for me? And how can I use that?
I love that. And like you said, even if you have 15 seconds, just close your eyes, breathe for a second. I know for me, what's really worked is saying, if I am like reacting emotionally to something, like why, right?
Yeah.
And if someone is upset, knowing that it is their problem, right? I mean, depending what they're upset about. If they're upset at us for something, that's a different story.
Yeah.
But if they just come off with negative energy from the get-go, like there's clearly something else going on before you even came and you just happen to take the brunt of it, right? But maybe, like you said, you have dealt with a really emotional situation. Like maybe someone had this like breakthrough, or they had like a moment with you and there were tears. Like that can also be an energy you absorb. And you go into your next session and you're just like, oh my gosh, like I'm speechless, right? Yeah, like Tyler said, if you feel like crap, clients will feel it. Like they 100% do. And so I love that. Just take a moment, even to go take a walk. I think removing yourself from the situation and then coming back,
Mhm.
even if it's just like walking to the bathroom and back.
Yeah, exactly. Or like get a sip of water. Like I always have my like jug with me, right? Like just something to take yourself out of it before you bring yourself back into it. And Tyler's mentioning mirror neurons too. Like you speak in my language. Like I just yeah, it's so true. We do really absorb. We
Mm-hmm.
absorb and we exude. What's the word I'm looking for, right? That's an energetic give and take, even
Right.
over Zoom. I feel like nothing's happening in person anymore. And um and I mean I personally love it. I think it's great. Like the world has opened up. That we're not just resigned to working with the people in our 15-mile radius anymore, right? But yeah, it can happen. Dondra says sage. Yeah, absolutely. I do that too. Or just I light a candle. That's something I like to do too, like to just um change the energy of the space.
Right. Oh, I love that. There's so many things you can do. Like that's the beauty of it. And you have to find what's right for you.
Yeah.
Right. So what would be your number one tip you would give someone that wants to bring positive psychology more into their business so that they can be more successful with their clients and their sales, of course, and all the other good things?
Ooh, that's a really good question. Okay, so first and foremost, you have to take the quiz. I call the Via Strengths, I call it the Cosmo quiz of the positive psychology world because it kind of feels like, I don't know, I'm sure like, us women can relate. I don't know how many guys read Cosmo when they were teenagers, and I don't know if they still even do Cosmo quizzes, but like 15 years ago, I would get my Cosmo, take the
Yeah.
quizzes. And yeah, so the Via Strengths, it feels very much like that. There's a lot of questions about like, you know, I'm willing to step up and say something when I see an injustice, or when I'm on a walk, I stop and look at the breeze through the trees, questions like that. And it's like a 1 to 5 scale. And I think it's 100 questions, but none of them are like too involved. It should take maybe 15, 20 minutes to do it. So first of all, you have to take it so you can find out what your strengths are. But then, so my number one tip, gosh, I think it would involve I think it involves pre-work. I think the number one thing that I would want someone to do to implement positive psychology into their sales, into giving their clients the best experience, would be to practice a little bit of journaling. Think about the areas of your life, the different
Mhm.
areas of your life and the areas of your business that you can implement your newfound strengths, and journal about it, write about it, sit with it, meditate on it. I think by, like I mentioned earlier, right, this is not the natural state of things, or it's not our natural inclination as humans to think about what we're doing right and how we can continue to do it right. So that requires a little bit of work. So I think spending that time, and it doesn't have to be a huge amount of time, but just by writing something down, it solidifies it within our minds. And so take some time to journal about your strengths and how you can use them, how you feel about them. I think a lot of times people take the strengths quiz and they're like, wow, I did not realize that was one of my top strengths. And
Right.
so to really reflect on it and think about it so you can internalize it before you
Mhm.
take it into your next experience.
I love that. Okay, well, first of all, I think we all need the link to be able to go take this test if possible.
Yeah,
Maybe you can share it with me, and I would be happy to
for
um,
sure.
share it in like my bio. I can put it in the links, or maybe you can share it to your stories today or something so people can go follow you and learn more about it because it
Yeah.
is a fabulous test. If you have not taken your strength test, you need to go do it. Like that is your homework today from this live.
Yes.
And I love the journaling. And I think even just asking yourself, like, what does it mean to have these strengths? Like, what does it look like? And how can I improve it? And bring that more into my business, right? Because again, it's not a conversation we're having. We focus on what we're not doing, right? And
Hmm.
why we're not getting to our goal as a result of it, instead of how can I use my strengths to get me there? And I
Yeah.
think that is a huge reframe.
Yeah. Definitely.
Well, Danielle, is there anything else about positive psychology that we left out that you absolutely wanted to bring up?
I don't think so. I think we hit it all. I'm like, I had my little notes, I had my little textbook. I wanted to make sure I hit all the bullet points, and I think we did. And I think we did that and some. So
Yeah.
I'm super jazzed about this, and I will definitely put I'll put the link in my stories to the VIA character strengths, and then also to Strengths Finder through Gallup, because I think the more self-aware we can be, just the better where we are as people in general, right? And the better we are as business owners, the more we know about ourselves, the better we can serve those around us.
I agree. And I will know, I don't know about the VIA test, but the StrengthsFinder one is not free. There is a
Oh,
fee.
okay.
I think it's like $25 to $40, somewhere in there. But there are a lot of free options. So I don't know if the VIA one is free that you can still take. Yeah, okay, fabulous. Well, Danielle, how can people learn more about you and the amazing work that you're doing and bring more positive psychology into their life?
Yeah, thanks. So you can follow me here. My handle's really easy. It's my name, Danielle Nicole Coaching. That seems to be a good idea when you're making your Instagram handle, right? Rachel Morgan Coaching, name plus coaching. But then my business, like I mentioned earlier, turning over a new leaf, representing a new beginning, a plant growth, the Calathea plant, I just really, really love. And so my business is Calathea Coaching. So you can find me on my website and more about my services there at calatheacoaching.com.
I love it. And again, I will attest having known you for, gosh,
A
like,
while.
worked for the same company for 8 years and
Yeah.
have still connected even a year and a half later. So I've known you a long time. I've dealt with you in many different ways and forms throughout the company, and you are amazing and dedicated and extremely passionate. And I know that any advice that you give is very comes from like a good place, and that you've done your research on it, and that you really do believe what you're talking about, and you really do want to see people thrive. So it's not just something that you say, it's something that you live and that you do. And I know that you have the attention to detail. So Danielle is an amazing person to know. Please definitely go follow her, go connect with her, and I promise you won't be disappointed. So
Awesome. Thank you so much, Rachel. I really appreciate it. Your kind words that just made my
oh,
Tuesday. Thank you so much.
of course, my pleasure, and thank you for being here with us.
Of
So
course. Thanks for having me.
thank you,
Bye,
everyone.
everyone.